Many college-aged Americans heard the words Islam and Muslim for the first time on a day they'll never forget. September 11th, 2001. The religion of more than 1 billion people was introduced alongside devastation and terror. Nearly 14 years later, misconceptions still surround Islam. We sat down with one Muslim American family who see themselves as ambassadors of their religion, responsible for representing what they believe in a positive light. Most college seniors were in elementary school when hijacked planes crashed into the Twin Towers. Their sophomore year of college, Boston was bombed on Marathon Monday. Overseas, months before graduation, Charlie Hebdo magazine was attacked in Paris, and ISIS terrorized the Middle East.
It's so saddening to think that my immediate reaction is always, man, I really hope this doesn't take another negative toll on my religion or on the way that people view Muslims or view me as an individual.
Ahmed Saad is a senior at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The 23-year-old is the middle of 5 siblings and has lived in the U.S. since his family moved from Cairo in 1993. He was 9 years old when the towers fell. Today, he is still working to shift the perspective on Islam.
A lot of my friends don't necessarily have other Muslim friends, or maybe we're the only Muslim family that they know of. So it's important for me, at least, to have them over to our house, to show them around, and to, I guess, make it clear that whatever image they might have had of Muslims based on what they've seen on the news or based on what they've heard or whatever, that's not necessarily true.
Ahmed's older brother Mohammed sometimes finds predetermined judgments in conversations with people he's just met.
So have you felt almost on the defensive for a lot of your life?
I wouldn't say on the defensive, but just having to put in a little bit more effort to break those stereotypes or to guide people into understanding what exactly is it that I believe in.
Their sister Amena, a high school junior, feels the same added responsibility to shift the perspective. Just a few months ago, she made the decision to wear a headscarf. Now that such a recognizable emblem of Islam is part of her wardrobe, she's more aware of everything she does.
Does that added pressure ever build up on you? Do you feel that pressure?
Last year in school, if I I wouldn't be afraid to talk back to a teacher, or I got in trouble sometimes, but this year I'm more careful to hold myself back and be more patient with people, because I just want people to connect Islam in a positive light.
Choosing to wear the headscarf wasn't a decision she made lightly. Amena debated it for months. She had gone 16 years without one and was nervous about the reactions she would get.
Is everyone still, as open to you as they were before?
Definitely not. Before, people, I would just talk to anyone, I wouldn't really have to introduce myself. I'd just jump into a conversation. Now I feel like people kind of expect an introduction. They're what is she doing here?
Shireen El-Gamal is the mother of the Saad children. She's a university Arabic professor and wears a headscarf every day. She helped her daughter make the decision to wear a head covering after months of conversation.
And some of what she said didn't make sense to me. But I think this is part of raising a child. We don't make sense to each other, and then we meet somewhere in the middle.
Since their kids were young, El-Gamal and her husband Ihab have had family discussions about how others view their religion. It's a conversation they're still having today. It almost seems like they've become ambassadors to their religion. Would you think that's true?
Yeah, there is a sense of responsibility with, and actually sometimes they talk about this, that they want to act foolish or they want to make a rude remark in class, and then they say, my name gives it away, and I don't want to be the Muhammad guy who gives his teachers trouble, or the rude girl with the head cover.
Growing up, Ahmed remembers having run-ins with ignorance, like being called a terrorist during soccer games.
Did that during the game?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the game, that you have to recognize that it's not like it's a one-way street. I'll be saying stuff back, likely not about their religion, maybe more about their lack of talent at the sport of soccer or something along those lines. But
I would say that the terrorist accusation is a much different insult than anything else, though, and a lot more unfair.
I would definitely agree, but at the same time, in the moment, on a soccer field, I'm not going to be sitting there arguing, hey, that's not fair, you can't say that.
These assumptions linking Islam and terrorism weren't always so common. 55% of Muslim Americans say, since 9/11, it's more difficult being a Muslim in America. For El-Gamal, the attacks immediately impacted her life.
One night, I was sitting in class waiting for the professor with my colleagues, and one of my classmates walks in and say, hey, Shireen, how is this bin Laden guy?
He just asked that to you out of the blue?
Yeah.
Even with the widespread confusion and harm done that day, she remembers the overall love and support from the community surrounding her.
My next door neighbor knocked on the door, brought me flowers, I remember that very well, and said, we do not think that you are all, evil or bad or anything like that. we appreciate you for who you are.
But Ihab says despite the kindness from their neighbors after the attacks, 14 years later, he still sees the actions of a few extremists projected onto the Muslim population as a whole.
Whenever a lunatic person does something who is identified as a Muslim, all the Muslims are accused, whereas if the same action was done by a non-Muslim, he's a lone wolf, he's a mentally unstable, he's this or that. And the best example is what happened last month with 3 of our community.
In February, 3 Muslim students were shot and killed in Chapel Hill by their neighbor, whose motives are still under investigation. Dia Barakat, one of the victims, was one of the first people Ahmed met within the North Carolina Muslim community. We sat down with Ahmed again, this time at his house at UNC. How close were you personally to the victims?
Our older sisters would hang out and our parents would hang out. And so he just became kind of this really integral part of my experience with the Muslim community in the Triangle.
Although he was abroad at the time of the shooting, Ahmed was amazed with the community's response. A crowd of thousands gathered at the Chapel Hill Vigil.
You have this terrible tragedy and this backlash of kind of emotional support and this outpouring of love and support for 3 people that I would say the vast majority of people here did not know.
Ihab has spent years discussing the roots of his religion in this same community. He makes it his goal to represent Islam's teachings through his actions.
So if I say, for example, Islam, the religion of peace, from now until next year, no one's going to care. But once they see that I'm a peaceful person and I treat everyone with respect and I try to alleviate any pain from any person, regardless of their faith or lack thereof, they're going to understand truly what I mean by Islam is a religion of peace.
The Saad siblings say one of the biggest misconceptions about their religion is the nature of the Muslim call to prayer, which works in similar fashion to church bells, serving as a signal to pray. But some associate it with violence.
Really, any movie within the context of the Middle East, why is it that when you hear the call to prayer in these movies, it's almost foreshadowing of something bad about to happen? And this is a pretty common trend. You can see this in almost any film that you watch in that context.
This was in like a Scandal episode like 2 weeks ago when she was taken by like some like secret society, and in the background you could hear the call to prayer.
In January, Duke University made national headlines when the school decided it would broadcast the call to prayer each week, but then reversed the decision after receiving a flood of backlash.
Obviously, there's no backlash for church bells ringing.
Right?
But why is there backlash for the call to prayer?
It's almost understandable to say, oh, we don't want this call to prayer, because there's such a negative stigma surrounding that call to prayer, where most people don't recognize that it is, like you said, the equivalent of church bells ringing.
Muhammad noticed a spark in discussion about Islam after the incident, and in response to the Chapel Hill shooting. In recent years, he's seen an increase in non-Muslims' curiosity and desire to understand their religion.
5 years ago, if I were to sit down with a friend or an acquaintance and have these conversations, I would feel a general sense of condescension or a general sense of judgment. Whereas now, when I do have those conversations, the general feeling is, oh, they're very inquisitive, they're curious.
Americans are more educated about Islam after 9/11 than ever before. Young adults cite the attacks as the most important influence shaping the attitudes and beliefs of their generation. When 9/11 happened here in America, it was the first time a lot of people had heard about Islam, and obviously it was in a very negative light. How do you think things would be different if that didn't happen?
It's hard to say. I think Muslims and Islam as a whole definitely wouldn't carry as much of a negative connotation as it does now. But I think also it sacrifices this learning opportunity that I've talked about of people being curious. A lot of people, especially in this day and age, don't take things at face value, and they do want to ask more questions. They do want to know more about it.
Sparked a conversation that wasn't happening before.
Exactly, yeah.